Hello, everyone. I'd like to, Carol, are you going to say anything? Or is Father Kevin here?
Is Father on, Anthony?
Not that I can tell, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, let me just say welcome to all of you. And Ron, particularly, we appreciate you giving your time to come and share with us, because liturgy is such an important part of who we are. And having the expert come and share with us is most important. And so for that, we say thank you very much. And thank you to the folks that have joined in to hear you also.
Excellent.
I turn it over to you.
Okay, I want to begin by thanking you, Carol, and thanking Father Kevin as well for inviting me. And to all of you who have joined this evening, I am most happy that I am in your presence, even though it's virtual. But now we know that virtual is real. It's not something that we do that's a figment of our imaginations. It actually does convey knowledge. So thank you, Carol. Thank you, Father Kevin. Thank you, Holy Redeemer, for making sure that we somehow got this together. You know, we've been talking about for a while, Carol.
Yes, we have.
And now we are on and ready to go. Now, the subject, of course, is liturgy. Liturgy is life. Liturgy is the work of the people. Liturgy requires the people to know their work. One would think in all areas of worship, the person who is doing the job should know their job and should know their work as well. But liturgy and the way that we worship comes out of our lives, our lived experiences. And so this evening, instead of going right into what the documents say about this, that, and the other, I wanted to go backwards for a moment so that we can see where we came from as Black Catholics. We were not always Black Catholics. We were Catholics in the church who happened to be Black. Now we are Black Catholics in the church. The church is ours. We know that to be true. And last evening I met with, I have the list of names here. I was welcomed by Harold and Anita and Anne and Adriana and Reggie and Dr. Lorraine and of course Carol. And I wanted them to, I asked the question, what are your hopes and dreams for the ministries that you are in charge of, that you organize for, that you schedule for as well? And we came up with several things that are important, and I'm going to go into those as well, but on tomorrow when we are clearly involved in the liturgy of the in the introductory rites. Now one might say, well, you're going to spend tonight talking about history? Yeah, I am. Why? Because it's important for us to know it and to know that it just didn't happen yesterday and that people have been working for quite a while. Many of them have given their lives. And there is one person in particular that I'll speak about on tomorrow who has given his life to working on behalf of the holy people of God who are African American and Black. So there is a history, there is a theology, there's a spirituality, there's a culture, there is to consider and resources to be developed as well. So y'all have a lot to do. And I'm saying y'all have a lot to do because I'm on the back end of things now. I'm not going to be able to do this as well or as long as I have been doing it. And that's just the reality of life as well. And so I'm hoping that someone someone is going to get interested in the combination of music and liturgy, or liturgy and theology, or liturgy and spirituality, or liturgy and history, or liturgy and culture. All of those things feed into this phenomenon that we call liturgy. Liturgy is life. And those people who are doing the work of liturgy should know their ministries. Let me tell you, should know their ministries. And I'm not chiding you. I'm simply bringing it to your attention. Tonight, as I said, we'll take a look. And when you see me looking over this way, it's because I have a whole script here because I didn't want to forget anything. So tonight we'll take a look into the history behind the movement that birthed the attitude of desire for cultural nourishment. We look at the person I call Thomas Dorsey. Now, you know that Thomas Dorsey wrote Precious Lord, Take My Hand. We know that he, we know it because we know, precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn, and it goes on through the storm. That song came out of a storm for Thomas Dorsey. There was a death. His wife died, but then when he was on the train from Georgia going to Chicago, his daughter died as well. It just bowled him over. And he was depressed and aching and sad for a while. Out of that ache, out of that sadness came Precious Lord, Take My Hand. And so out of, for the person that I call the Thomas Dorsey of Black Catholic music and liturgy, that person's name is Father Clarence Joseph Rivers. And Clarence Joseph Rivers was a real person. We hear about him, but we don't see him, and didn't see him for quite some time. Since about, I'd say 1990, he was not as visible as he could have been. And we'll talk about his death later. But I call Father Clarence Joseph Rivers the Thomas Dorsey of Black Catholic music. But for us, it's attached, it's got to be attached to the liturgy. So liturgy and music is what we are about. For him, liturgy was a complete view of the liturgical, religious, spiritual life of the church that should be found in church, except he added something else. He was very serious about heart, mind, and soul. And he always spelled soulful S-O-U-L-F-U-L-L, which is not the correct way to spell it, but he was very intentional about that, because everything that he wanted that was done in liturgy, Clarence felt that it needed to convey the awesomeness of God, the awesomeness and the greatness of God as well. So therefore, looking at liturgy and music, yes, and theology and catechetics and all the other, but Clarence also included dance. Dance was important, and he also wanted to touch the heart, certainly, and the mind and the whole soul, and he wanted that heart, mind, and soul to participate in the liturgical experience. So he was a holistic liturgist, and we'll talk about more about that later. But he said that in order to do worship well, you needed a well-formed minister in order to do this. It's very important that we have people that are well formed. I was working with someone several weeks ago, and then it came to Lent, and they kept saying, well, when are we going to sing the Gloria? So I said, well, maybe, I think I've mentioned this to you before, whereby during Lent, we don't sing the Gloria. We do not sing the A word as well. No, even if it's hallelujah and not alleluia, we don't sing it because we're anticipating its greatness, its inspiration when we get to the Easter Vigil. Well, they got quite upset because they felt that I made them feel ignorant and that they didn't know what they were doing. And I have done this for 41 years, they said. And I'm thinking, oh dear, you've done this for 41 years and this was your understanding and nobody corrected you. Well, let me just say that I love you and I love what you do, but you will not make me feel as though I have injured you by telling you a truth. If I see you going toward singing that Gloria, I'm going to trip you up. And the reason for that is because we, as Clarence says, we need well-formed ministers who know their work. So whether you are a cantor or a musician, whether you are a preacher, whether you are a Eucharistic minister, whether you are a lector, whether you are an usher, you should know that job and know it well, because you encounter the holy people of God on Sunday morning. Going back to maybe I would say 1964. Back to 1964, well, actually it was just before that, maybe 1963. It was Father Busemeyer there at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Cincinnati, Ohio, who asked the young priest, who just happened to be Father Clarence Joseph Rivers, to begin to write music for the people there, because it was a Black church, to sing, the liturgical music for them to sing, because Clarence worked with them and with spirituals, and Father Busemeyer had never heard people sing, the people sing like that before. It was so enthusiastic. It was so inspiring. It seemed that they threw their whole selves into the singing of whatever spiritual it was. And out of that came God is love. And out of that God is love became a phenomenon. There are two things that Clarence changed. And we're going to see that visually in just a little while. Once Clarence had written this piece of music, he was invited to St. Louis, to Kiel Auditorium, to sing our communion song. That communion song, of course, was God is Love. Yes, he sang it. There are about 20,000 people there at this auditorium. It was the first Mass in English in the United States, and Clarence was there. People didn't know what to do. They had never heard anything like this before. They sang the song and sang the song, and finally Clarence had to be moved off, and they called him back when the Mass was over. And for over 10 minutes, they simply sang God is love and the verses to God is love as well. They loved that piece of music. and it went all over the country. Thus, Clarence Joseph Rivers from Selma, Alabama, was introduced to the entire church. So God is love is the precious Lord of the Black Catholic musical experience. And I want to go back even further. There was no such thing as a gospel choir in 1962-63. When Clarence first started, he was ordained in 1959, I believe, 59 or 56, I'm not sure. 59 or 56. But the first gospel choir in a Baptist church was in 1933 in Chicago. And it was Dr. Thomas Dorsey who led that choir. And it was from 33 all the way up to, I would say, 69. Father William Norval in Washington, D.C., decided that he was going to have a gospel choir in the church. It's St. Benedict the Moor. And he called for the gospel choir, I believe it was in 71 when he first did it, because there was a lot of resistance to it. He would have done it earlier, but there was a lot of resistance to it. But Father Norval, being Father Norval and knowing what's best for his people, said, no, we are going to do it. Many people left the church because they said this music has no business being in the Catholic Church. I didn't join the Catholic Church to be singing this Black stuff as well. But you know the whole story. You know the whole story. And that didn't work. The first choir director didn't work out too well. And so I was sent by someone to St. Benedict the Moor, and Father Norval spoke with me. And now, mind you, I was not Catholic at the time. So what he did was he came to rehearsal every time we had rehearsal. By the way, holy people of God, when we start talking about Friday nights and Saturday nights, the St. Benedict choir met every Saturday night at 7 o'clock. And from 7 until 9, we rehearsed. And we would be ready for Sunday morning. Father Norval came to everyone, and he would then talk about to me on Monday morning about the readings that were coming up and what I might want to sing, or this is what I'm going to be preaching about as well. So he increased my knowledge, certainly. But in 73, I met Father Clarence Joseph Rivers. That was an experience, and began to travel with him. And to show you what kind of influence he had, I was teaching there at the at St. Benedict school. But whenever Father Rivers would call in the middle of the day, and he would say things like, "Okay, I have to be in Columbus, Georgia, 2 days from now. I want you there." And I would say to Sister Clementina or Sister Mary Charlotte, Father Rivers called. Oh, Father Rivers. Oh, by all means, you've got to go. You've got to go. And that's what I would do. I went all over the country with him and still kept my job at St. Benedict. It was so wonderful to be a part of that experience. Now, my liturgical education actually began at Mountain View Baptist Church. I started playing for the church at 7, playing for the junior choir, I should say, at 7. And from that time, I was totally engaged in what was going on in the church, always. And it was, I continued to be involved in that church for quite some time. And I'm looking at what worked and what didn't work. how did they get from one place to another? Father Clarence Rivers understood that it was important that he explained to me what the introductory rites were. He explained to me what the liturgy of the word was, explained to me the Eucharistic prayers, explained to me what a meditation was, and explained to me that he wanted many different kinds of music in the celebrations that he did. I was more than happy to be part of that and of that experience, and we continue to be engaged in learning. It's continuous learning. We, as I was saying, we formed a Black Catholic Conscious in the 60s. In 1968, it was the Black Catholic Clergy Caucus, and later being joined by the sisters as well, and also the seminarians. All of this started in 1968 and in 69 and 70 as well. We were building up who we were as Black Catholics. And I want to say that it is extremely important that we have, now I'm looking for something, that the Black Catholic movement truly engaged the holy people of God. And remember those people who were there at St. Benedict? The ones who left? By 1975, those people came back to the church because many of them had left years before. They never thought that they would experience anything like Blackness in the Catholic Church in their lifetime. They came back in droves. So many came back that we had to take the Mass out of the church into our social hall, which seated over 600 people. And it was, people were coming from all over the United States to be there. Clarence brought a whole group of liturgists there from the liturgical conference to St. Benedict the More. The first time I met Sister Jamie Phelps, she was studying at Catholic University of America, and boom, she pops up at St. Benedict the More, and that's where she stayed for the whole time that she was engaged in study at Catholic University. So I was gradually being pulled even more into the Catholic Church, and making sure that I understood things as they went along. It was when I met Father Rivers, and this is not all about me, but I was there, quote unquote, in the beginning, and so I'm talking from my own point of view and my experiences. Father Rivers was a very exacting person, and there was a brother, Joseph Hager, who had invited Clarence to come and celebrate a liturgy for the opening of the offices of Black Catholics in Washington, D.C. It was going to be at a high school. And Father Rivers said that he would come, but he wanted to let Brother Joe Hager know that if he didn't like the music, and I was the music person and taught the choir before he got there, if he didn't like the choir, he would go back to the airport. That was Clarence. Very exacting. Well, I want you to know that he stayed. And as I said, I was invited to many places in order to in order to play for him. There was some, and keep your if there are questions that you have, please write them down, because there is some history here that you may want filled in. And I constantly think about the social ferment. This is Anthony, this is on page 5, thinking about the social ferment that brought about the Black Catholic movement. These things were happening and had happened. One of those things was the 1954 decision, Brown versus the Board of Education. The bus boycott in Alabama, led by Martin Luther King Jr. The assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, and later his brother in 1968. And the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th of that very same year. All of these things were going on. And if you know anything about that period, the Black Panthers were there. People were saying Black Power. And James Brown was singing, "I'm Black and I'm proud." It went over into the Catholic Church. What a wonderful time, a wonderful experience that was. That first Sunday that I was at in the Catholic Church, this was the song, the first song that was played in St. Benedict by myself for the choir, and that was, "Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way, the one and only way. Jesus is the way." I'll never forget that first piece that I played in the Catholic Church. It was really a wonderful experience. I was talking about Father Norval, who formed that first Black choir in Washington, D.C. The second church that had a gospel choir was Holy Comforter St. Cyprian. And you know who was there? Kenneth Lewis. His was the second gospel choir in the city. And Kenneth wasn't there in the beginning, of course, but he stayed at that church for 32 years. Talk about dedicated. 32 years before moving to Atlanta. So Anthony, please bring up the first picture of Father Rivers. Thank you. Here is a person who was an anomaly in the church. He was an anomaly in that he was Black. He was very proud to be Black. He grew up non-Catholic. When I say non-Catholic, I'm saying that he grew up until the 8th grade. He was Protestant, but his mother, Lorraine, sent him to the Catholic school that he was, and he was engaged in what was going on. He said that he was very not only engaged by it, but he thought it was a mystery that he wanted to be a part of. And so one day he became the holy priest in the Catholic Church. Now, mind you, he was not welcomed, and for almost, oh, I would say, well, there have only been 3 Black Catholic priests in Cincinnati, Ohio. Clarence was the only one for probably 20 years before Father Cross was ordained, and now there is an other person as well. And he had many struggles at the Athenaeum, there in Cincinnati, Ohio. They thought that he was far too sensual because he liked to wear what you call this fragrance. I think the name of it, if I can remember, it was Jade East. It was a men's cologne. He liked to wear that, and they thought he was being sensual. He also liked to smoke good cigars, which was very suspect, that he was not a person who was continuing his humbleness as a humble priest. So nonetheless, Clarence went on to surpass many things. One of the things, as I mentioned before, Father Busemeyer had him to begin to write things for the church. And at that point in time, the spirituals basically were all that Black Catholics had to sing. And it's ironic in that those spirituals could not be sung in the cathedral in Cincinnati, Ohio. The name of the cathedral is St. Peter in Chains. The archbishop, felt that spirituals were secular music, and so therefore could not be sung in the Holy Church. But you know, Clarence being Clarence, he worked his way around that as well. And let me tell you what he did when the bishop came for confirmation, and said that secular instruments could not be used, namely drums could not be used. And of course, by that time, in 1966 or so, Clarence had been using all kinds of instrumentation. The bishop had heard about it as well and had called the church to let Father Busemeyer know that no instruments would be in that church when they were there celebrating confirmation. So the story is, and I purposely made sure that I don't miss a word, said to reach his congregation, Clarence crashed through the barriers that held the dominant white Western European liturgical aesthetic firmly in place, an aesthetic that Rivers would later argue essentially inhibits ineffective dramatic worship with its mistrust of emotion, with its distance as well, and the fact that it was so discursive, so heady, that it didn't reach the heart. He didn't simply ignore the directives on Sunday. He flouted it during the celebration of confirmation of St. Joseph by the bishop who had written by Clarence's account, when the procession stepped into the church, I do not want those instruments. But what happened? Clarence writes, when the procession stepped into the church, I unleashed the energy of the school children on the timpani. The congregation sang with all their hearts. Now, Father Rivers was never reprimanded for this disobedience. Why? His answer was, because we had done it well. The bishop could not say anything. We had done it well. Rivers knew exactly when and how to break the rules, when and how to break the news. Well, Thank God for Clarence. Thank God for him being the person that he was. At the heart of the worshiping community, and this is really looking at ministers within the community. At heart, Rivers's concern was not that worship be more culturally resonant, religiously appropriate, or expressively African American in style, but that worship became more effective for Black Catholic communities. That's what he wanted. That's what he was working for. He wrote a book called Effective Worship. And for Rivers, effective worship had several recognizable characteristics. First, it nourished the human need to transcend. That transcendence was such that the way that you entered church on Sunday morning was not the way that you left church. Somehow you had been lifted up in such a way that your problems or your depression or your concerns, you had found answers for. That's transcending where you are. And with people being lifted up, drawn beyond themselves, beyond the here and now, it quenched their thirst in such a way that God was praised. It enables them to praise God for God's generous goodness to them and give thanks. It's one of the characteristics. A second characteristic was that effective worship addresses the real needs and the real concerns of people who are participating. There is no way that one can attend church and not hear one thing about what is going on in their lives, not be touched by one thing that will lift their hearts, that will aid them in their transcendence. He goes on to say, it addresses the real needs and concerns of the people participating. Worship is rooted concretely in the human life it attempts to symbolize, while strengthening it and deepening it as well. Remember what we said at the very beginning? That liturgy is life. Liturgy is the work of the people, and the people should know their work. Theologically, it expresses what the Hebrew prophets proclaimed long ago, that worship truly pleasing to God cannot be divorced from an active concern for the needs of the human community. You've got to know that you've been to church. You've got to know that you have been revived. You've got to know that God cares for you. That even though your concern might be about what's going on around the corner from your house, God's concerned about that too. God is going to take care of it. And even if it's not taken care of for the next 2 to 3 months, when it does happen, you thank God because you knew that God was going to make that way out of no way. Was going to do that. Third characteristic. This characteristic challenges many who practice Catholic liturgy, is that for worship to be effective, it's important that worship is enjoyable. You say, well, of course. Remember that we're talking about the 60s here. We're not talking about 1988 or 2008 or 2011 when we hear all this stuff. That we're talking about Mass being enjoyable, about Mass being memorable, about our spirits soaring. That was unheard of. So you must know that, or you should appreciate, if you will, Father Clarence Joseph Rivers for bringing this forward. He said that worship is enjoyable, open to the joy that dilates the heart, puts mind and body at ease. It draws people into God's ever-abiding spirit within them. If people can return to worship as they return to the dining table, anticipating that their hunger will be satisfied, they will have been graced by effective worship. Father Rivers would say this in almost every lecture that he gave around the country. And finally, and most important, I believe, effective worship lends to metanoia. Metanoia is that ongoing conversion of heart and renewal of spirit that changes people's perspective. Metanoia. Here's Clarence again. Clarence, as scholar. When Sister Mary McGann, RSCJ, and Sister Eva Marie Loomis, SSS, and myself engaged in writing the book Let It Shine, one of the title was Let It Shine, the Emergence of African American Worship. And you're going to see a picture of it at the end of what we're doing this evening. Clarence, in that book, Let It Shine, Sister Eva and Sister Mary McGann give a historical perspective on the work of Clarence Joseph Rivers, because he was instrumental in bringing about the revival of spirituals and also writing music, especially for Black Catholics, to bring about those things that he thought effective worship did, and which was to bring about transcendence. And Clarence was one of those people who would work with even the worst reader. He would have them to come by his house, and he would have them to proclaim, and he would have them to do it 2 or 3 times a week as well. Very, very patient with people. And everybody thought that he was terribly arrogant. And that was a way of keeping people away from him, because he was also very introverted as well. But he was, he would work with the worst of the worst. And because he wanted them, if they were scheduled to do whatever it was at the Mass on that following weekend, he wanted those things to happen, where a person experiences metanoia, that need to be not only revived, but to revisit that ongoing conversion of heart, the desire to be converted and know the need for it. But they began to look at, Sister Eva and Sister Mary began to look at music and liturgy, and they wrote that it is not surprising that music was one of the first areas of focus in parish renewal. Black sacred song, they continued, is perhaps the most comprehensive repository of Black spirituality and theology. Spirituals were the first source of African American music to be used by Catholic communities. This reached back into the roots and early glimpses into Black religious experience in the United States. Listen to what the servant of God, Sister Thea Bowman, had to say. And there are several of us who are on the Zoom call this evening who knew Sister Thea, who enjoyed her presence in our lives. And I remember being at St. Sabina there in Chicago, and she came to do a revival. It was just a joy having her in the house, because I lived at St. Sabina for about 4.5 years. And it was just a joy to have her right there in the house. And if you went to the Institute for Black Catholic Studies, she was a part of the foundation of that institute, and was just a wonderful and good thing. Listen to what she has to say dearest Sister Thea, about the Black experience. Something that most people don't know is that Sister Thea was an extremely well-educated woman. The lady had her PhD in English. Most people didn't know that because they thought that she was just a country girl. No, she was very learned, very astute, and very knowledgeable about who her God was and who God could be to many other people. She writes this: African Americans in fields and quarters, at work, in secret meetings and slave festivals and churches and camp meetings and revival, wherever they met or congregated, consoled and strengthened themselves and one another with sacred song. And these songs were sometimes in moans and chants and shouts and psalms and hymns and jubilees. First African songs, then African American songs they did. In the crucible of separation and suffering, African American sacred song was formed. Now, we are in a church that is very much detail-oriented, that is so old that it knows the very first thing that happened in the year 1000, or the first thing that happened in 349. And when we hear about people like Tertullian, who was responsible for so many things, and Tertullian was there in the 300s, or it's just amazing what our church knows and what it would behoove us to be able to appreciate that very much. For us moving into this church, what we don't understand or appreciate is that we have changed the Catholic Church in ways that the Catholic Church doesn't even know. How is it that people like could sing "Blessed Assurance, Jesus is Mine" and not be in a Baptist church somewhere? No, we're Catholic. And yes, that song can speak to us. First African songs, Sister writes, and then African American songs as well. Clarence was a person who loved music, wrote music, appreciated good music, and one of the pieces that he loved was this little piece here. I told Jesus, be all right if you changed my name. I told Jesus it would be all right if you changed my name. I told Jesus it would be all right, be all right, be all right. I told Jesus, be all right. If he changed my name, if he changed my name. Old song, but it's new because it's sung in this present time from this present experience. And so therefore it's not just the old spiritual, it is a song that seeks to transcend. It's a song that's and in many cases is sung by people who are looking for and have the desire for metanoia. It's for people who enjoy that which is a good and wonderful thing called the African American spiritual or African American music. But you could see that Clarence loved this music. This was the song "This Little Light of Mine," or "Every Time I Feel the Spirit," or "Wade in the Water," or "Down by the Riverside," or "Ride on King Jesus," or "Steal Away," or "I Got a Robe." And he loved this little piece here to sing and quote using a certain verse. This was a city called Heaven. And the refrain is, sometimes I'm tossed and driven, Lord. Sometimes I don't know where to roam. But I've heard of a city called Heaven, and I'm trying to make it my home. He would love to sing that piece of music. And at the very end of the book, I wrote, Sister Mary had me to write just a little fervorino in regard to Clarence, and I used that piece of music. Sometimes I'm tossed and driven, but I've heard of a city called Heaven, and trying to make it my home. There has been some critique of emotion, and it's what do I want to say about emotion? There are some who say it's a good and wonderful thing, for others who say I'm sick of people standing and shouting and yelling and screaming, blah, 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 blah. We run the gamut of worship and praise. And I admit that there are times during a service that I am not engaged. There are times when I just have to disengage. Most of the time I am, but I think everybody is like that as well. But my whole being is captured by what's going on. If it is done well, like Clarence did for that bishop, if it's done well, I am there and making sure that my whole being is being nurtured by what's going on. However, there are times when it lapses into something else. Somehow it becomes a secular show in the church, and it's not effective. And so one would say, okay, I'm going to fold my arms and sit here and watch this. And people will say, well, you're just not engaged. Oh, yeah, I am very much. But I'm not engaged the way that you're engaged. So, but I respect the way that you engage within what's going on. And I expect you to respect the same thing for me as well. I don't pray like you. I don't transcend like you. And the one thing that Clarence says is that the phenomenon of emotion, which is not always found in Black worship. Clarence says that it's one of the highest senses. He says that it's a way of communicating heart to heart, breast to breast. It's a mystical way of participating as well, and as a way of knowing and learning and all the things that that are good about what it means to be a struggling Christian. We need to say yes to emotion. It need not be loud. We need to say yes to emotion. It need not be boisterous. We need to say yes to emotion. It does need to be engaged by depth. So for you who are lectors, yes, I do expect you to understand what you are proclaiming, and that you have studied it in such a way and practiced it in such a way that you, the essence of whatever it is that you're doing, whatever you're proclaiming, is coming forward and feeding the hearts of the holy people of God. If you had done less than that, you had done damage, I would say, to the gospel, to the word. And one could say, well, no, because the word, the Spirit can work its way through many things. And we hear Jesus say, you should not put God to the test. Do the work of your ministry, which means that you must study and show yourself approved. If you are going to be a musician in this church, you've got to be aware of what's going on in the readings. What is the season about? How is it possible for Jesus to grow up in 3 weeks during Christmas tide, and suddenly we are singing about a phenomenon where he's being presented in the temple, and what is it about the Advent season, and what is it about the Lenten season and ordinary time? You've got to be aware of all those things if you are a musician within the church. If you are in dance in the church, you've got to know that recordings are okay. They're okay. They're okay to a point. There should always be the engagement of live choir and live dancers. That's very hard to achieve, because both live dancers and live choir have to communicate. And yes, sometimes the choir is going to repeat a chorus that they don't repeat on the recording, but the dancers have to be able to adjust in such a way that that they are right there with the choir, because there's a spirituality. Remember that what emotion is? There's a mystical way of participating. There's communion, communication going on. And that's what I loved about Kenya Griffin. she would, by the time she finished and her dancers finished a piece there in Atlanta when I was working with her, uh, you couldn't touch her because she was so far away, just caught up in the spirit of things. And sometimes she would just start going through the motions of whatever it was that the choir was singing, and the choir would just come back and join in. And you say, "Oh my goodness, look at this! This is phenomenal." That's because she knew her craft. And she knew who created the craft. She knew, and she was a seeker of God as well. And for you who are Eucharistic ministers, y'all, it's more than just the distribution of communion on Sunday morning. You too, Eucharistic ministers, should know what those readings are. You should know what those readings are saying to you. You should be taking care of someone who is unable to come to church on that day. You should seek them out. You should be sent from the church to that person as well. Every Eucharistic minister should be on the battlefield after Mass to get to whomever it is so that they can offer communion to them. You are just as responsible for living the word as the lector and everybody else is as well. So you can see that I'm bringing all those things that Clarence brought. His clarity, his willingness to work, his way of being in Christ, and bringing them all to the liturgical experience. Oh, can we go to the third picture, Anthony, Father Rivers as friend? This was Clarence. You know, he was in his regalia and all the other kind of stuff, but this was really Clarence Rivers. He was just a simple person who loved what he did, loved the Lord as well, and he loved his church there at St. Joseph. The people loved him. There's a room that is named after him at St. Joseph, and they loved and honored and respected him. He was just a good person. To Black Catholics around the country and all Catholics here in the U.S. and around the world, they loved him. But let me tell you the next great thing that he did. The first one was that he brought God is love, and the people thought it was phenomenal, and it changed the way in which we approached music for Black Catholics and the church at large. This is what he did. Anthony, the next picture. Look at that. Now we are in a place in Philadelphia. It is the Eucharistic Congress. People are there from all over the world. This is in 1976. The Eucharistic Congress had not been in the United States for 25 years prior to this. And Clarence, because of his clarity of mind, because of his vision, because of his genius, and because of his creativity, did this. All of these vestments, think of it. Think of all these vestments on 150 people. We're talking about people who were the cross bearers, people who were priests, people who were bishops and archbishops as well. 150 people. And each one of these vestments for each one of the groups in the procession was individual. There was a group of nuns who worked on these day and night. There was a deacon, David Camelli, who designed all of them, In 1976, then, it was Clarence Rivers who introduced the liberation colors to the rest of the Catholic world, actually. So we changed the church in a tremendous way. It was, I need to go on. He took abuse from so many people, and including those who were his friends, and endured mean remarks about his music, about his faith, about his musical ability, and his wanting to bring chaos into the sedate Catholic Church. He died in 2004. And yes, he did have a PhD, very much like Sister Thea. He studied at the Athenaeum there in Cincinnati. Then he came to Washington, D.C. and studied at Catholic University of America. And then he went to the Institut Catholique in Paris. And then he came and went through the same school that Archbishop Like went through, and that was the Union School, which is a different way of looking at education, and he gained his PhD. He was ready. He was ready for what he needed to do. Let's go to the next picture. Yes. In the book on the left, the colorful one, that is a book that came out of the inspiration of Archbishop James P. Like. And Archbishop Like wanted to have a hymnal expressly for Black Catholics. And he called together a group of people. It must have been 24, 25 people that gathered at this place in Chicago and devised what the book was going to look like, getting compilations of this, that, and the other. And he assigned Marjorie Gabriel Burrow and Leon Roberts and myself as compilers and editors for Lead Me, Guide Me 1. We started in 84. It was released in 1987. The Archbishop knew that we needed some some antiphons or refrains for the Psalms, and so he said to Leon Roberts and myself, "I want you to write them," but he said, "I don't trust you being at home, so I'm going to send you somewhere." And what he did was sent us to Chicago to St. Sabina Catholic Church. We spent 3 weeks there composing the 24, I believe, antiphons for this book, the Lead Me, Guide Me. And we're still grateful to Father Michael Flager for embracing us and bringing us in. We were treated royally. Now, mind you, the book on the right is one that I'm going to be Clarence Rivers for a second. I'm not pleased with it. The reason that I'm not pleased with it is because of the way it looks. The looks have been domesticated. It's plain green. How dare they do that? And now, mind you, GIA is one of those publishing companies who is going to be publishing my music in the future. And I'm taking on the spirit of Clarence Rivers and saying that for the next Lead Me, Guide Me, some color's got to come somewhere. It should not look like any other book. Thank you very much. Go on and to the next. Thank you, Anthony. This is the book that I was talking about, Let It Shine. And over a period of time, the book got as low as $3. Yeah, about $3 a book. I think it started out at 27. The academic book, however, the hardback academic book was $70 at that time. This was in 2008. When I noticed that they had gone down that low, I bought 30 of them. And what I did was give them to people for birthdays or just as gifts or whatever it might be. And thank God now, the book has now gone up. As more people are buying it for their classes. So Let It Shine, the emergence of African American Catholic worship. The emergence of African American Catholic worship. And there is Mary McGann, Eva Marie Loomis, and myself. So on tomorrow, when we begin to look at the introductory rites to the Mass, I'm going to be bringing many of these characteristics that Clarence introduced to us and that the Church teaches as well. I'm going to be quoting from the General Instruction on the Roman Liturgy, or GIRM, GERM, and from the document Sing to the Lord as well, and also some material from that I wrote as 23 what we call performative practices. These are things that effective worship is built upon. And for those of you who are ministers in the church, whether it's usher, whether it's catechist, whether it's the organizer for acolytes, whether it's dance, whether it's lectors, whether it's music, all of this is for you to understand, knowing that you have a responsibility to bring all of this to pass. Okay, can I ask for if there are any questions for a minute? Holy people, you've been on long enough, actually, and we start again tomorrow at 10 o'clock your time as well. Are there any questions this evening?
I have one, maybe a request, not a question.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in my small hometown, it was very segregated, and I went to Catholic school. And we actually had a very progressive priest. And at our Friday masses, we sang Father Rivers Mass. Growing up with God is Love, we sang the whole Mass every single Friday. When I was growing up. I don't know a whole lot of people who are aware that he did a Mass or that sang it growing up, but we did. And and this is for later, if I could just find out where I could get a copy of the songs and for the Mass. I mean, because I'm 70 now, but growing up, that's what we did.
You're what now?
I'm 70.
Oh, okay. Congratulations.
So this was a long time ago.
That was a while. Yes.
I was in, 6th, 7th grade.
Yes. Yeah. Now the music of Father Rivers is still in limbo. his sister has finally decided where the music is going to be housed. It's going to be in the archives at Catholic University here in Washington, DC. And we're hoping that once those archives, the entities have been placed into the archives, that they are going to be available for people to use, to copy, to use in church as well. We're hoping and praying that, that's going to be. But this just happened, I would say about a month and a half ago. And of course, Father Rivers passed in 2004. So I was elated when I got the telephone call that this was what's going on. There is also going to be in that archive place a CD of 5 people who are going to be speaking about Father Rivers and all of the work that he did. And I'm proud to say that I'll be one of those people speaking. And if you were to come to those archives in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you'll hear me say whatever it is that I'm going to say about Father Rivers. It's a wonderful, good and wonderful thing. But we're hoping that that music comes out of limbo, and we're able to make it available for people.
Yeah, it was just a wonderful mass that we did. We
Yes.
always looked forward to it every Friday, lunchtime.
Remember this, Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again, hallelujah.
Do you remember Sun and Moon? Praise the Lord.
Yeah, yes, all of that. And the creed as well. There was just all kinds of wonderful music that he did. And I was so happy. Any other questions, please ask, or observations? Okay, then I am on my last. For me, it is 9:30 plus, and I've been up all day, and I'm just kind of going, I'll be much brighter on tomorrow when we come together. Be ready to work, be ready to speak as well, because we've got a lot of work to do. Also, I'm going to be meeting with you 2 other times before I come to San Antonio at sometime in the summer, so I can be present with you. And there at at that time, we're going to do the closing rites. So tomorrow we're looking at the introductory rites and the liturgy of the word, and then we'll come back together again and look at the liturgy of the Eucharist and all the things that are part of that. And then when I come in the summer, we'll do the closing rites. But you tell your loved ones who are ministers in the church to get on the Zoom call. They can stay at home. And yes, at this point in time, I'm chiding you. Get on the Zoom call so that we can be people worthy of God's call for us to be ministers in God's holy church. Okay? Carol?
You're muted, Carol.
You're muted, Miss Carol.
Carol, you're muted.
I enjoyed this immensely. I did.
Okay, here. it's important that our ministers understand what you're saying and what they are hearing. And to me, you know, I've known you forever, and it's good. It was a good evening, and it's a good preparation for tomorrow. And I say thank you.
Anyone else want to say anything before we leave?
Thank you very much for a wonderful evening. I came in actually hurting and staying real quiet, but I have hung tough, learned a lot. Thank you so very much for this.
Who am I speaking to? Who's speaking?
Hardin.
Who?
John Hardin.
Oh, John.
He's our choir director.
Yes, yes, yes. I look forward to meeting you.
By all means.
Very forward. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm not going to do those Southern goodbyes where you say, "Oh, I'm going," and 10 minutes later, people are still talking to one another. So, bye, y'all. I'll
Thank
see
you,
you on
Ron.
tomorrow. Yes. And thank God for all of you. Please take care.